Okay, so hello and welcome to this recording. This one is about getting to grips with academic writing. It's a really short session introducing the basics about what academic writing is and how we might approach those skills needed to put writing into practice. The aims, therefore, for this session are to look at what academic writing is, the process of writing an assignment, including the planning process, and briefly about using Peel to help structure that writing within paragraphs. Although we do have a recording on the YouTube channel about Peel in more depth, so we'll only touch on that briefly today. If you're interested in looking at Peel in more depth, then go ahead and have a look and watch the video on Peel separate to this one. And finally, we'll have a look at ideas on using referencing to get a little bit of depth and breadth to content in our writing. But again, if you're interested in that after listening today and you want that in more detail, we also have a video on using referencing and why we use referencing in our writing in more detail, which again you can have a look at and watch back on our channel. What is academic writing? Well, if we start with the circle here on the left-hand side, we can see that the top segment tells us it's a formal approach to presenting information and arguments. It's formal in that it's writing based on evidence, as seen in the green segment further down. Such evidence quite often comes from academic research on the module materials. It is because academic writing is approached in this way that the third person, as we move down here, is usually what is required, as seen there. Do check, though, with your TMA or your assignment guide each time to make sure that is the case. For instance, part two of some assignments, especially at the Open University, or some of the assignments that you might do later, might ask for a personal reflection piece. And in that way, if it's a personal reflection piece, it would be in the first person. So double check with your TMA guides whether it's wanting you to do an academic essay or whether it's wanting you to do a reflection piece. If in doubt, always go back therefore to your assignment guide and it will state in there which approach you need to take. Third person perspective, as you can see from the triangle on the right hand side, is the perspective that takes the I and the you out of your writing. We no longer present what I think or what you think the ideas are. Instead, academic writing in the third person requires us to present much more of an objective, balanced, logical set of evidence from which the assignment can then conclude an answer. This means using phrases such as, this assignment will argue that, or the following paragraph will explore the issues of, rather than I think or I will argue that. Following on from this, back to this circle over here, we can see in the blue segment that academic writing rarely holds a mystery to it. It's not about presenting an intriguing story where we lead the reader on through twists and uncertainties and then just at the very end suddenly show what the conclusion is. Academic writing's the opposite to that, really. It's a logical, open presentation of pros, cons, comparisons for and against, arguments across ideas, and concluding remarks and findings discussed all the way through. And that leads us to this orange segment here, the structure. Structure forms a really significant part of academic writing. And we'll have a look at that in a bit more detail in a moment. But in general, academic structure, it's about having a formal introduction which really sets out exactly what your essay is going to look at, explore, how, in what order, and the answer that you'll come to by the end. This structure then leads us to the final point in the circle above there, which is the point and purpose to academic writing. Academic writing always has a purpose. It's there to answer a question, prove a point, explore a particular idea. Academic writing, it tells us about a process of unpacking a question. And the process of writing an assignment might be different for every person. So you need to have a think about what works for you. And the ideas above are just one example. We can see in this example that academic writing can take a lot of time. It is a process. It's not something that just happens instantly onto the page. You might start, for instance, just simply writing down what you already know about the TMA question or the assignment question you're working on. That's a really great way to start. And it starts to make you think. really about what the key words are, what the things are, and the ideas are that you'll need to have to explore and go back and look at. Also helps you if you start to unpack that question and the ideas that you think about when you read that question. It'll help you to think about what you remember from the modules or the activities or the chapters or the articles you've been looking at, rather than copying back down or rewriting that information. So it's great when you first start to think of an assignment to really use your own memory, your own thoughts, your own ideas of, now what do I remember from that? What do I think about that? So you really start to get an idea of ideas right at the beginning of your planning stage about your own thoughts, your own words, your own explanations about those ideas that you may have looked at in the module that you're studying. So try at this stage to avoid rewriting sections from particular chapters or activities or sources, and instead close those all down. Use your own words, use your own explanations to put some of those just initial reminders about what you've covered from the module that might be relevant. That will then help you later when you come up to write the answers and your ideas down more formally. Having done this, make a list of areas that you're not sure you're right about, or not sure you can quite remember, or things that you're not necessarily clear about. That gives you the opportunity then to revisit the module, go back to the activities you've been looking at, go back to the chapters that you've been thinking about. Start to then actively reread those particular sources you need with purpose. So you're not going back to the whole chapter, you're not going back to all the activities that you've done in the last few weeks. You're going back to the ones you need to help you remember and to refocus on the issues you need for this particular assignment you're writing. That's when you can start to then plan your ideas out. And planning is really individual. It's not going to be the same for everybody, and that is okay. Feel free to, in fact, just feel free, not just free, but encouraged to try out different ways of planning until you find the way that really works for you. One way is to create an initial plan that focuses on the title and the question. Then you put down your thoughts and ideas from your own memory, and then you join those up with the ideas that you've gone back to from the module to support and get evidence to back up those ideas. It's then a process of setting all of that out and beginning to write various drafts of the actual assignment itself. And then again, that can be quite a personal thing. Many people do this in really different ways. Some people start with the intro, then do the main paragraphs and then the conclusion. Other people work on those main paragraphs first, coming back to the intro and the conclusion later. And either way is absolutely fine. Some tips, though, here might be to read your final draft out loud to yourself. Really concentrate on not rushing that process. When you're ready to hand something in, before you do, literally read out each sentence one at a time. Pause when you've used a comma, no other time. Take a breath only when you've used a full stop. Really hear how your sentences are coming across to the reader. Remember that usually a sentence should be readable out loud in just one breath. So make sure your sentences don't get too long. Check for that grammar. Double check sentences are complete in their own right. Try to make sure they all have their own main clause, their own verb, their own structure. Make sure you haven't just written a phrase, the cat, or sat on the mat. You really actually write the entire sentence. The cat sat on the mat. Check for spelling mistakes, and if possible, turn on that spell check guide that you have in Word, and make sure you have your language set to English UK, not English US or any of the other languages as well. So when we then start to really unpack the question, what does that mean? What does it mean to unpack the assignment question? One of the ways to do this is to start thinking about the real specific words used in that question. And questions in the assignments will always be worded in a way for a particular reason. So all the words matter in the question. So one of the ways I've put down here is to first think about the direction words. What are the direction of assignment writing words being used in the assignment you've got in front of you at the time? For the example above, I put a pretend. It's a fictional question. We need to pretend the assignment question is, using module materials, explain and evaluate the ways Piaget and Vygotsky approach learning development. So if we pretend that was our assignment question, The direction words in this particular one are to explain and evaluate. And I've highlighted those in purple, explain and evaluate. To me, I need to make a note of that so that I know particularly what type of writing, what type of peel paragraphs, what level of peel paragraphs I need for this particular assignment. It might, for instance, say describe and explain, or it might only say evaluate. But I need to know that because there's no point describing things if my assignment actually doesn't want that. It wants things explained and evaluated. And again, there's no need to evaluate if the main direction words are to describe. So it's really important that we work out to begin with the direction of the writing the question is asking us to do. Then I think about content words. What is it that the assignment wants me to explain and evaluate? In this case, it's asking me to think about what it's asking me to think about Piaget, Vygotsky, and learning development. So those are the things I've got to explain and evaluate. So I now know how and I now know what. But what am I going to use to do that? Is it my own thoughts, my own feelings? Is it something I've studied beforehand in a different module? Again, go back to the question. What is it asking you to use? Well, it's asking me specifically to use the module materials. So that means I know I need to not bother with Wikipedia, Google, the OU library. I need to use this particular module materials and I need to use those to explain and evaluate Vygotsky, Piaget, and learning development. So I need to make a note of those so that I know exactly the way the question is asking me to approach the academic writing. Once you've done that, you can start to plan your peel paragraphs and you can start to plan your peel points. And I've put here an example. And again, if you want more depth into this, we do have that video about using peel and the different levels of peel. So do have some spend some time going back through that if you can. However, just as an example here for you to have a look at, when I start writing an assignment, the first thing I need to think about is the fact that each paragraph I write can only be about 1 point. There's only one P in peel. Each peel paragraph is about one particular point. But how many paragraphs, and therefore how many points, can I fit into the essay that I'm trying to write? I know for me, and again this is very personal, that I usually write about 200 to 300 words per paragraph. About. That's how many words I need to get through the peel process for each point. For some of you, that might be 400. For some of you, it might be 300. For some of you, you might not yet know. Go back and have a look at essays you've written in the past, or just try out writing and see how many words you end up needing for paragraphs. But if you're not sure, think about 250 to 300 for now, and you can always tweak that as you learn about your own writing styles. So I'm going to go with the fact that my average is about 250. Some paragraphs will be longer, some paragraphs will be shorter, but I'm going with an average of 250. If my essay then is allowed to be 1500 words, so you'll be told for your assignments what the word limit is. Let's say that our assignment is 1500 words for this essay. Well, I know that I'm going to need probably 10% of that for the intro, 10% for the conclusion. Again, just an average. It's not going to be specifically and definite, but about 10% for the intro, 10% for the conclusion. So 10% of 1500 is 150. So I know I'm going to need 150 words for the intro, 150 words for the conclusion, 300 words in total for that top and tailing. That's going to leave me with 1200 words for my main content, my main writing section. So I know I've got 1500 words in total. I know I need 10% for the conclusion, 10% for the intro. That's going to take out 300 words from my total, leaving me with 1200 for my main section. Now, if I know I've got 1200 words to play with, and I know I write about 250 words in each paragraph, well, in 1200 words, therefore, I can probably fit about 5 paragraphs in. Because if I do 5 times 250, I get to 1250. That's just over what I've got, but give or take, it's probably going to be roughly around there. So I'm going with about 5 paragraphs to fit into this 1,500 word essay. So I now know I've got 5 paragraphs to write, topping tailing it with an intro and a conclusion. If I only have 5 paragraphs to make, I only have 5 points that I can make. Now I can start planning. What are the main 5 points I want to say about that essay? Okay, now I can start thinking. Let's assume I want to make 5 points. Now I need to plan who shows me evidence for, against, and about those points I want to make. And this is where your voice comes into it, because although you're going to be using the third person, this assignment thinks this paragraph will present that, it's up to you to choose which 5 points you present. And that might be different across everybody in your group, and that is okay. There's not necessarily a definite you must cover. Think about the 5 points you want to make about that particular question. Think about where in the module you're studying you found evidence for it, against it, or about it. Who has told you what about it? Then we need to go back to those direction questions and think about, for this case, in our example at the moment, how we might explain and evaluate those ideas. And from that, we can start making our peel paragraphs. So I need to think about, okay, what's the first point I want to make? The first point is probably something fairly descriptive in the sense that I want to start the essay with perhaps what Vygotsky and Piaget said about learning development. Then I need to, so that might be my point. My point is Vygotsky and Piaget began or introduced ideas about learning development through stages, through scaffolding. Okay, now I need to work out where is the evidence. Think about 1 or 2 places from the module. Where did I get evidence about that? Well, I learnt about it maybe from Montgomery's chapter. I learnt about it maybe from an activity online. In my plan, I'm going to give myself the referencing information so that I've got that there and then, so I don't have to go back and look for it later. And then I've got to, again, keep remembering those direction questions. I haven't got to just describe them. It didn't ask for description in this essay. It asked for evaluation. So I need to evaluate, okay, what happens when I put those sources together? What am I going to be saying about why they're important? Then for the end of that paragraph, I need the link back to the point. I need to put a conclusion. What's this paragraph about X and Y said? How's it helped answer the TMA question itself? So for point 1, I thought, what is the point I'm trying to make? My point is this. This is where I'm going to get the evidence from the module, because that's where it asked me to get evidence from. Then I've got to remember the content direction questions. It was evaluate and explain. So make sure I am going to not just describe them, I'm going to evaluate and explain them. Then I'm going to conclude that point by bringing it back to the point I was trying to make in the first place. Excellent. Okay, what's the second point I want to make? Second point I want to make is, and we go for whatever that is. Go through the same process again, find the evidence, remember the direction words. Are you describing, explaining, or evaluating? Link it back to the point you were trying to make in the first place. And go through your 5 points that you want to make. At some point, then, you're going to end up with a structure that looks a little bit like this, where you have your intro and your conclusion, and in between it, your paragraphs. When you're planning, you might want to do it literally like this. And this is quite similar to how I plan. I visually, literally write down the subheadings, intro, paragraph 1, paragraph 2. I then take out those later, but I put them in for my plan. I instantly write point, evidence, explanation, link, peel, PEEL, down my page, however many times I know I've got for that essay. So for this essay, I know I've got 5 points to make to fit into the word limit. That's 5 paragraphs. So I would write peel, PEEL, vertically down my page 5 times. Now I know I need to fill those in. I've got 5 paragraphs to make, 5 peel paragraphs, 5 points. However, everybody will do things differently. So your plan might look a bit like this, where you literally fill in the PEEL 5 times, one for each paragraph point. Or you might find it easier to use a table where you put in the information you need for each of your paragraphs into a table. You might find that you prefer to actually start not writing out the paragraphs, but in more sentence structures, less formally, where you have the headings in different places, whatever makes sense for you, basically, whatever helps you see what it is that you're trying to do, but making sure that your plan fits the question, direction words, and content words that that question has really asked you to unpack. So, whatever technique you use for planning, make sure it comes back to really focusing on the direction words, the content words, and the words telling you what to use from the question you were starting with in the first place. Don't forget, we've got the video on using Peel for more information on that PEEL process and which level of peel is right for you. A very quick summary of what that video that you can go and look into more depth with Peel covers. It goes through writing and using Peel at level 1, which is where your direction word is mainly about explore, about describing things. It's a very descriptive version of Peel. Level 2, where you move on and your direction words in your assignment might be describe and explain. And then the more challenging version of Peel, which is where you don't just describe. In fact, you describe in a very limited way, and you spend more time evaluating the combination of sources and evidence, and that's the more level 3 version of Peel. Try to see if you're confident first with the level 1 as you watch the video, and work your way up through the levels of Peel, to challenge yourself when it's right for you. Normally, you will then end up with an essay that is very well structured. You can see an example here, very small. You don't need to be able to read the print. The idea of this is that you can visually see that an essay has a very clear separation between your paragraphs. You won't need the headings of your paragraphs on the right-hand side here. That's visually to show you that it's very obvious to the reader where each Peel paragraph is presented. You can literally see the line gap in between, and the reader is confident that each one of those holds a Peel paragraph discussion about the particular point that will help answer the question that's been set. If this has helped, hopefully it's helped. If you'd like to look out for more detail on any of these aspects that we've looked at this morning, we have other videos on the channel. We have videos on referencing within your paragraphs to help with that process, structuring your paragraphs in particular. We've got videos, obviously, that we've touched on already today about using Peel. We've also got videos covering how to read the module materials and how to read academic articles to help you get that evidence, those two E's in the middle of Peel, your evidence to use and to help you with your academic writing.